And we're live. Greetings, everyone, to episode 2 of the two Abdullahs with Abdullah Gondal and Abdullah Samir. Your two friendly neighborhood ex-Muslims here to present a very bang-on topic, slavery in Islam. A very serious topic and highly relevant, especially with all of the Black Lives Matters, the racism, all of the activism that's going on right now towards freedom of, not just freedom of religion, but also, treating people as equals, no matter what color the skin is. Black Lives Matter, or the whole movement, shows you that we humans actually care about fairness, about justice, about equality. And some Muslims have actually taken to kind of appropriate this whole thing and say Islam is against slavery. Sorry, Islam is against racism, but they forget that Islam actually allows slavery. So we're going to go into it. It's going to be a very hot topic, a very interesting one. And at some point, we're going to take calls as well. So we're going to share the link, and please invite your fellow Muslim, especially, to call in and ask questions. It doesn't have to be on the topic, but it'd be preferred if it is. But we will take questions, a few questions here and there, and we have a very interesting stream that we're both working on. Okay, Abdullah Gondal, how's it going?
Hey everybody, glad to be back here a second time, and hope you enjoyed today's installment of the show. Today's show is going to be very, very interesting because we found some incredibly weird and bizarre narrations, especially surrounding the topic of sex slavery. And this isn't limited to the companions of the Prophet or the people who lived around him. The Prophet himself indulged in it with full-heartedness, and he actually had concubines. So before we get into the details, I just want to make a few points clear, is how slavery ties into moral relativism. So, for example, if you were to ask somebody, a Muslim today, is slavery immoral? Objectively, most of them will say, oh, it's immoral. But then you ask them, well, what about the Prophet doing it? Then they're like, oh, it was okay back in that time. As soon as you say that, you're just becoming a moral relativist. Now, keeping in mind, if you can't prove your God, or that your God is actually giving you objective moral commands, from an external perspective, your morality is indistinguishable from moral relativism, in a sense that you only have a man who's making these claims about morality, these subjective claims, and he's attributing them to God. So from an external perspective, the Islamic morality becomes very subjective. One of the other interesting thing is it evolves slowly. And this is something we see with humans coming up with moral ideas as well, where, for example, take alcohol, right? Alcohol was first allowed, then it was banned for prayer, then it was fully banned, to the point where some Sahaba would be drunk in battles of Uhud and whatnot, right? This slow progression of morality and moral changes also gives into the idea that, in fact, the theistic framework is very relativistic. It's just that the people don't realize it. Now, the problem is, why criticize Muhammad? If Muhammad was just a man of his time, is it worth even criticizing him for things that people did just like him? The point is, Muhammad doesn't claim to be just a man of his time, and nor do Muslims. Muslims and the Quran in Surah 33, verse 21, it says that he's the best example for all times to come for all or anybody who believes in the last day. Once this claim is made, that's when we have to start criticizing Muhammad, because we can now identify that the ideas and concepts found in Islamic morality are unsuitable for modern society. It just is. You can then say, well, my morality and my moral judgments are subjective. Yeah, of course. We make axioms and we go off of those. For example, I can say my moral axiom would be increasing human happiness at a societal and individual level, and some people have other axioms. But generally, at the end of the day, the point that needs to be understood, that morality is just another biological adaptation of the mind that helps us survive. This is all it is. And humans then agree on what parts and what rules we collectively choose. Uh, and then there's the functionalist approach to morality as well that is adopted by a lot of anthropologists, that no moral framework is inherently better or worse than another one, but it serves to do the function, i.e., uh, does it help that tribe or those people in that time survive or aid their survival? So that's the functionalist approach. Uh, Now, another question I just want to get out of the way is Muslims will say, well, Islam couldn't ban slavery right away because it was too common and too rampant in society. But this strikes me as a very, very wrong point, because Islam did ban a lot of other things that were very rampant in society, like alcohol, like usury, i.e. riba, like idolatry, fortune telling, and a bunch of other things. Thank you, Sandra. Thanks for the shout out. Love you too. For those who don't know, that's my wife. She's watching our stream. But the point is that this lack of prioritization that you see from this omnipotent, omniscient God does not make sense. Where he's banning every other vice in the Arab society that is bad, but then he leaves slavery, or he's just he doesn't even actually mention slavery once in the Quran in a bad light. It's always mentioned as a sign of the believers in Surah Mu'minun, and then the Prophet can do it. It's a prophetic thing. Uh, so with this backdrop out of the way, what we will get to is get into the deep end of things, where we were going to delve into questions like, do sex slaves get to give consent? Does their consent matter? How does that chime in with rape and our modern understanding of slavery? And then we'll also get into, did Muhammad have slaves? Did the Sahaba have slaves? Did they indulge in extramarital sexual affairs with these slaves? And did their wives object? So it will be an interesting thing. So I will pass the microphone back to Samir now.
Great.
And then we can start with the presentation.
You made some very good disclaimers. I just want to add a little bit to them. What you said about man of his time, this is very, very important, because Jonathan Brown and others have talked about this as well. And they say, well, you guys are being unfair. You're projecting your values from today's time backwards onto Islamic society of the 7th century. Muhammad had slaves, or so did whatever, Thomas Jefferson or George Washington or whatever, Abraham Lincoln. I don't even know, like a bunch of famous men from history. And are we gonna condemn all of them? Yeah, we could condemn them, but there's a difference. The difference is that Muhammad was corrected by Allah. Muhammad is the only man in history who is considered the final prophet, the final guide for mankind, the best example, the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to and will correct him when he goes astray. If he does anything wrong, even according to Sunni understanding, even as much as frowning at a man, like the blind man frowning at him, Allah corrected him. Allah corrected the companions when they stayed too long in his house and they were bothering him because he wanted to go and spend time with his wives. So this is a man that had God, the creator of the universe, watching over him, saying, this is going to be the final message, the final example for all of humanity forever and ever. Now you're saying you're going to compare that to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, like random non-Muslims that like did a bunch of shit and did some good things too. So like you can't compare. The problem is Muhammad is a pinnacle of creation, the Sayyid, the master of humanity. So when we ex-Muslims or non-Muslims are criticizing Muhammad, we're allowed to do that because that's the claim you're making. Islam is making a claim, and it's a very tall order, right? The other thing is, just quickly, of the whole thing about Islamic values. So in the debate yesterday between kind of hardline Muslim and the Apostle Prophet, he kept saying that Islamic values are good for society. Look at you guys, your families are falling apart, blah, blah, blah. And this point, like, is a big sticking point to this is good for society. Slavery is good for society. It's good for Muslim women that a man can have slaves. Is it really good for society? Is this good for Muslim women? Is this good for humanity? It's not. But let's go to the presentation and let's see what we have there. And as Gondal mentioned, we're going to take some questions, but we're going to go to a bit of this presentation first. So Jonathan Brown, in his book, I never finished his book, but just to define slavery, it's a little bit tricky to define it, but it's basically an involuntary relationship of mutual dependence between two quite unequal partners. So there's a master and a slave. The unequal, there's an imbalance of power right there. So that's very important to note that these are not equals. Why is slavery a problem? Why are we even talking about slavery? Jonathan Brown again says ISIS's reasoning on slavery cut deep because it was so clean. ISIS claimed to be the caliphate reborn, re-establishing the Sharia according to the book of God and the way of his messenger. The Quran had allowed slavery. Prophet Muhammad had slaves, and all of this had been allowed by the Sharia. So why shouldn't ISIS do it? This is a very good question, and this is a question that troubled many Muslims and troubled him, which is why he wrote the book. Because you have something that claims to be this ultimate moral authority, yet it's doing things that seem wrong. Are they equal? So this was also mentioned in the book that when Jonathan Brown, when he first read this, and he was a non-Muslim, or he was converting to Islam, Allah sets forth the parable of two men, one a slave under the dominion of another. He has no power of any sort, and the other a man on whom we have bestowed goodly favors. Goodly favors here includes having slaves, okay? And he spends there freely, publicly, and privately. He's a free man. He can spend his money however he wants. Are the two equal? So Jonathan Brown actually said in his mind, he was thinking, aren't they equal?
They're not.
Good question. Are they equal?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting seeing that this power imbalance that is acknowledged by Muslim scholars and the Quran itself, and we actually see constantly that Allah keeps saying that the believing men, it's a sign of piety to have sex slaves, apparently, in Surah Mu'minun.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's so interesting that this power imbalance exists and people don't see an issue with it. Like, you should have an issue. If you're saying that you're the slave of Allah, you're the abd of Allah, well, anybody who's the abd of you is still it's a power imbalance that should trouble you. And you can't be trading humans as commodities or properties, where sometimes he would trade like 2 black slaves for 1 non-black slave, or 7 slaves for 1 slave girl, right? So it's evident that slaves aren't put on the same pedestal in terms of equality as equal free humans, or free men and women. And that is very, very sad. This is just not right. You shouldn't do that. If we were to go like this verse 9:5, it says that wherever you find them and capture them. This brings back the point where a lot of slavery is tied with the prisoners of war. In Islam, what normally happens is you may attack a tribe or be partaking in jihad, but once you win the war, you capture the men and the women. You can then take the men and the women as slaves. You can then have sex with them. You can sell them. You can trade them for weapons and horses and other things. And this is very important because we will get later into this, that if a caliphate exists and a war broke out against the kuffar, many scholars still argue that the Quran actually never banned slavery.
Yeah.
So they can still take slaves even in the 21st century if a caliphate comes. And that's exactly why ISIS's slavery model was a problem. Because theologically, they are still okay in theory.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, let's go on. Ooh, that's the verse I was talking about. إِلَّا عَلَىٰ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ غَيْرُ مَلُومِينَ. So literally, this whole surah at the beginning.
So the beginning of the surah says, "Successful are the believers." It's praising the believers.
And then it goes on to the signs of the believers, and one of the signs it says, "And they guard their private parts." They don't indulge in sex outside marriage and zina and whatnot. But then it says, except from their wives or those their right hand possesses, meaning you can have sex with your slaves. And this is very, very well known. Now, this hadith embodies one of the deepest problems in Islamic sex slavery. If you read this, it says that we went out with the Messenger of Allah for the Ghazwa of Banu al-Mustalik, and we received captives from the Arab captives, and we desired women, and celibacy became hard on us, and we loved to do coitus interruptus. So when we intended to do coitus interruptus, we said, how can we do coitus interruptus before asking Allah's Messenger who is among us? And he said, it's better for you not to do so, and any soul that is predestined will be born anyways. What ends up happening here is these Muslim men go on to this jihad, and they're away from their wives. And another version of the hadith also says that they captured excellent Arab women. That was the wording. And celibacy became hard on them. But they also wanted to keep ransoming these women after. So that's why they were doing the coitus interruptus. There is a specific version that says that.
Sorry, I edited and I put this one instead. My bad.
Well, I'll find that one, but I want to show you because just to get the extent of how deep this.
That's a good point. The reason why we should be clear about that. The reason why they didn't want these women to get pregnant, because if they got pregnant, they can't sell them, right? They can't get money from the slaves. So basically, they want to have the cake and eat it too.
I'm gonna share the exact one I'm talking about.
And in the modern world, ISIS took this further. They, I mean, I hate to even talk about this, but they basically said that if you use condoms, then there's no waiting period, because then you know that the slave is not pregnant, so you can sell her right away. So you don't need to.
Can you see my screen now?
No, not yet.
Okay, give me 1 second. Here. Okay. All right. So that's the hadith I found. And this one, it says, we went out with Allah's Messenger and took some captive, excellent Arab women. And we desired them. So literally, these Sahaba are horny. They're perverted, horny. And I don't know what that was. Sorry about that.
Skype, yeah. Yeah, so basically the basically saying that they wanted to sleep with these women, and they basically, yeah, they're out for war or whatever, and they didn't want to wait until they got back home, right?
Yeah, and they're trying to say that they're literally desiring ransom for them, but that's why they're pulling out, because they don't want to get them pregnant so they can sell them later on.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. Just reading this, it shows that these people were also said to be the moral champions, like, you know, the people that Allah has said that He's pleased with them. These are the flag bearers of the best moral champions in the Islamic civilization, and you can see these people indulging in such low, horrible actions. It's so sad.
Yeah. So yeah, let's continue the presentation.
Ooh. All right, this one's an interesting one. This was found this is actually in Imam Malik's Muwatta. What happens here is a man comes to Umar ibn al-Khattab and says, I have a slave girl, and I used to have intercourse with her. My wife went to her and suckled her, meaning she breastfed her, because suckling back in the day, remember, there are verses in the Quran that said if you suckle somebody, they become your mahram, i.e., you cannot marry them or have sexual relationships with them anymore. So this wife, she was jealous of her husband having sex with the slave girl. She went and suckled the slave girl to make her her daughter, so that her husband can't continue having sex with her. So the guy then complains, when I went to the girl, my wife told me to watch out because she had suckled her. Now this is hilarious. Umar told him to go beat his wife and to go to his slave girl, because kinship by suckling was only by the suckling of the young. So Umar says, no, go back and keep having sex with your concubine, because your wife is wrong. This is just outrageous. Like, what is even going on here? So what we'll do is we'll play this this little clip about from Dr. Shabir Ali, where he discusses consent and sex slaves. And after that, what we will do is we'll start taking questions and calls, and then we'll see if you can get a Muslim and have him explain how he feels about all of this.
Okay, let me mute you and see if I can get this to work.
And how does consent play into this at all? Can we understand anything about consent from this end? Like, does the female slave have to consent to that, or is it kind of like because she's owned and so therefore?
In the classical thought, the understanding is that by virtue of the fact that she's owned, she does not have the right to consent. Or to withhold herself from her master. The master has the full right over her, and her consent does not play anything in this relationship. We should understand that in the ancient world, women did not have many rights, and even marriage was not as we might expect it today, like a relationship of equality between spouses. So in the Quran itself, a woman is her husband is referred to as her Baal, which literally means her Lord. The interpreters thought of female slaves as having a secondary status, even below this, and that their consent did not matter in this relationship. They were fully owned, and the master had the right to all of the woman. In essence, generally in classical Islamic thought, it is taken for granted that a Muslim man can have up to 4 wives at once. And in addition to the 4 wives, he can have an unlimited number of concubines, which refer to women who are basically have slave status. When they are owned by her master, a woman owned by her master has to freely give of herself to the master. The master has the right to have sexual relations with her as though she were one of his wives. The believers are those who guard their private parts, except from their wives and what their right hands possess. But curiously enough, while this is often interpreted to mean that a man could have sexual relations with his female slaves, it is never interpreted to mean that a woman could have sexual relations with her male slaves.
Okay, do you want to make some comments? Let me make some comments first. I was honestly shocked when you sent this to me, because I couldn't believe Dr. Shabir Ali of all the people was saying this, because Shabir Ali is known as a sort of progressive among Sunnis. He's said things like stoning adulterers is not part of Islam. That was invented later. He says things like it's not haram to get a mortgage because and he finds a way of kind of interpreting the Quran in a way that says those who consume riba, therefore it's only the banks that are in trouble, not the ones paying the riba. He ignores the hadith. Like, he's done a lot of cherry picking in the past. I was shocked to hear him with a straight face talking to this Muslim woman. Yup, Islam says we can have sex with slaves, and her consent doesn't matter. In fact, she has to give herself willingly, her whole body. Women, wives, and then he said, back then women didn't have much rights. He's basically saying in Islam.
Well, basically, like I said, he actually does the same exact thing, the point I made in the beginning, moral relativism. He doesn't get it, or he's not seeing it, that as soon as he says, well, back then it was okay, yeah, that's what it becomes. The video, like you said, when I first saw it, it's from 2016, but I came across it like a few years later, and I was just going through my old notes, and I came across it again, just watching it again. It was wow, and like you said, it's a horror show. Like, that video was just terrible. Like, he straight up acknowledges like raping of sex slaves was common, and then he actually goes into detail where he says that even marital rape with free women their consent is almost non-existent in Islam as well, where Allah is always saying that if a husband wants sex and his wife says no, then the angels curse her till the morning, or the hadith where she's riding a camel or cooking food in the kitchen and the husband wants sex, she has to be ready right away. Now he says that if you lower the slaves even below that, they have next to no no rights.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is, you cannot defend the idea that with the power imbalance that exists between a master and a slave, and then a slave doesn't really get to consent. And a lot of times, what also people need to understand here, and I keep telling Muslims to watch this TV series called The Handmaid's Tale. Why? Because there's a huge psychological component to slavery that Muslims, because they just completely miss. And this show will give you that even though, despite from the outside appearance, the slave has to put on to show that she's happy and she agrees and whatnot, the psychological trauma these people are put through is insane. So what I'm trying to get to is meaningful consent is very important. An example is, let's say, Rayhana, right? Like where Muhammad captures her and then says, "Be my slave or marry me," right? And what is she supposed to say? You killed her whole tribe, like that day, right? Or Safiya, you kill, you torture her family, and then you tell her, "Hey, will you marry me?" Obviously, at that point, the person is so traumatized they can't give you meaningful consent. They're so coerced and so psychologically manipulated. If she says, "No, I don't want to marry you," then what? Safiya stays as a slave with this guy she was already given to? Do you understand? So there's a lot of the psychological aspect people don't understand.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I do want to add to that. I think that that's a very, very good point. How do you get consent in such a power imbalance between, as one person said, I don't remember who quoted this, but you have this Afghani jihadi and you have a 13-year-old Yazidi girl. Okay, how in hell does she say no?
yeah,
There's no, it's not, and on top of it, there's no meaningful limitations put in the Quran and Sunnah to stop him. I always ask this question. Why didn't Allah insist on marriage before sex with slaves? Because you can marry slaves. I mean, that's allowed in Islam. That's encouraged. You can marry slaves. But why didn't he insist on that? Why is it that you're allowed to treat these people like property, to use them and then sell them? I mean, this is almost, it's not exactly prostitution, but it's similar in a way, because you can buy her. So we're going to talk about one of the apologetics about Islam says that Islam limited slavery to only one source, which is captives of war. But once they're captives of war, you can buy and sell them. You can buy and sell them, and they become like property. So once they're slaves, right? So I'm going to share the link if anyone wants to call in. And let's, while we're waiting for the calls, I'm going to show another clip by Mufti Abu Layth, which I thought was spot on. Okay, I'm going to mute you, Gondal.
Now, I got into a discussion where people tried to say to me that slavery inherently is not immoral. What the hell are they on about? How is slavery not immoral? Snatching somebody's wives and children and making them your property. That is utterly unacceptable. It is haram in our day and age. People will say, right, so, people will say, so what will you say about that day and age? We are talking about our day and age. It is now immoral. I'm not saying whether it was deemed immoral by them. Ethics vary. The ethics of age varies. So people today, we clearly see this as unethical. This is haram. It's not. Some people commented on my thing saying, yeah, but Islam doesn't say slavery is necessary, so it's better not to do it. Better not to do it? What on earth are you on about? This isn't like saying, hey, do you want to eat a cheesecake? I don't know, it's not really too good for my diet. Like, I suppose it's better not to do it. What on earth are you on about? Have you lost your mind? What do you mean it's not better not to do it? It's unacceptable. It's despicable. You can't snatch people's children under any circumstance. So this is the argument. Given some circumstances, you can snatch people's children and wives and turn them into your property. No, you can't. Under no circumstances can you do that. And then somebody said, well, oh, I heard this lecture as well, and these guys are, they said, oh, yeah, but we're not talking about like the US Atlantic trade, you know, the Atlantic trade slavery. We're talking about slavery like in Islam, where slaves had rights. I said to them, my friend, kidnap and rape is still kidnap and rape, even if you're giving them 3 meals a day. It is still kidnap. It is still rape. It is still utterly unacceptable. It doesn't matter if you put them in a 5-star hotel. If you've kidnapped them, you've kidnapped them. You know, if you're raping them, you're raping. It doesn't make it okay because you're giving them food to eat. So this is the most absurd kind of logic. And then somebody said to me, oh, well, they're not really slaves. We don't call them slaves. These were scholars arguing with me on a group. They said, oh, these are not, we're like, Islam says you're like the caretaker. I said, are you for real? Caretaker. Don't beat around the bush. Everybody knows what bloody slavery is. Don't try to kind of like give it this veneer of caretaker. If somebody snatches your kids, right, and calls themselves, I'm a caretaker. What do you mean caretaker? So you can't, this is nonsense. This is absurd. Don't try to lie and twist your words to beautify this kind of ugly brutality in this day and age. It is haram.
Oh, wow, quite. That sums up my position, honestly. Salute to Mufti Abdullah, my man. I feel like he's one of the most important, refreshing people out there, and he's actually, for those who don't know, don't judge a book by its cover. This guy is deeply trained in Islamic philosophy. He's a mufti with a decade of more training from all across the Muslim world, from Pakistan to the Middle East, and he lives in the UK. So he's seen it all. He knows it. And if he's telling you this, it sums up my position. At the same time, I don't know like if I should laugh, but at the same time, I'm so sad because like he's pointing out the absurdity of the reasoning people employ to justify it is just despicable, right? And it angers me at times, but what I'll do is I'll let Samir talk because after hearing Mufti Abdullah, it kind of got me a little riled up.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I just think that this is what he's saying is exactly on point. And honestly, Jonathan Brown kind of mirrored that sentiment as well. But he also got into this because I feel like there's no way to really justify something as bad as this. We do have a caller. We have Sharik. So should I take him? Do you want to add any comments, or should we just?
No, yeah, let's take Sharik.
Hey, those of you who are here, I had a hard time sending the link, but I put it in the description, so you can click the description to if you want to call in, and you just need a website. Sorry, you just need a webcam or even a microphone, and just go to the link, and we will add you to the call. Hello, Sharik. How's it going?
Hi guys, how are you?
Hey.
Good,
Finally, you do this at a time that I can join this. I'm speaking on behalf of everyone in the UK and Europe, and Africa, I guess. Sort of time works. This is great. Great to be on here.
Yeah,
I have a very quick question, but before I get to that question, I just want to say that Mufti Abdullah is just awesome. I mean, I love him. I love I like his clarity. Yes, he is a believer, and obviously that's his call, but. And he's full of joy, which is also refreshing from a mufti. I mean, I like a smiling mufti. I don't think there are that many out there. Usually they're smiling already. You're going to burn. That's when they start smiling. One thing just to add quickly, this is more of a comment. I'll get to my question very quickly. People who say that slavery was okay back then, well, if it was, then why would freeing slaves be encouraged? Obviously, it was bad even back then. How bad, there's a question mark on how bad it was or how bad it was considered back then, but obviously it was still not ideal. So
That's a good point.
either it's good or bad. I mean,
Yeah,
so it
because
can't be a
otherwise
little bit of
it would be a sin to free slaves if slavery is so
exactly.
good.
Mhm.
If it's so good, if you were a caretaker, then you'd get sawab for that. You wouldn't
Keep
you wouldn't be encouraged to
yeah, keep
keep
providing them
caretaking.
with,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
And the slaves, if they're so loving this, they'll
Yeah.
just want us to be
Yeah,
staying
why
as
aren't there
slaves,
more slaves? Why aren't there more slaves? Why was it so hard to get slaves?
right?
So that's kind of my take, and that was more of a comment. Now, my question is, you guys are more knowledgeable than me about all these things. Now we're talking about consent. Can slaves consent to sex? And also, Dr. Shabir Ali brought up wives consenting, etc. Now, my question is does Islam even understand sexual consent? Marital consent, yes. You need the nikah and all. But even that can get a bit dodgy. But at least let's accept that marital consent is a concept well understood in Islam. One thing that I've never been able to get a clear understanding of is, does Islam even understand sexual consent in any situation, whether it's rape or by force? That's probably why rape gets confused with adultery and fornication when it comes to prosecuting that under Sharia law wherever it applies. But even in a marriage, a woman is always supposed to be available, can't really say no, or is actively discouraged from saying no. And then angels are going to curse her to the morning, something like that. And so if it doesn't arise for wives, it doesn't arise for slaves, and it doesn't arrive in forceful intercourse, then is that the glaring issue there, that Islam doesn't understand sexual consent? But that's all I wanted to ask.
I'll go first. So I don't. Okay. So definitely, I think the idea of consent didn't exist back then because it's just not discussed in the Quran. It's not discussed in the Hadith in general. Sexual consent. If you go even back as far as the Bible, it talks about a man that rapes a woman. He has to pay some money to the father. It's kind of like he's harmed his property. And as a panel, he has to pay back money for that, and then he has to marry her. So that, I think it's in Leviticus. I don't have the reference on hand. But what I wanted to say is, I could be wrong on this, but I don't think Islam allows marital rape, because the whole hadith about she will be cursed until morning if she doesn't, give in to his sexual demands, it shows that she can actually deny him. Right. So my understanding is that Shabir Ali was kind of implied he can do whatever he wants with her. He was implying the opposite. I think the whole concept of consent is just missing altogether, because the relationship, the marital relationship is considered one where his sexual demands, his sexual needs are foremost. And for her, what's foremost is that he provides for her, and he gives her the mahar, which basically unlocks sexual access to her. So I don't think Islam allows marital rape. As far as I know, I don't think it does, because it seems to me that I don't know what would happen if it happened. Like, would he be punished? Is there a punishment for that? I don't even know.
Well, that's where my question arises from. So if something is not allowed, then there would be some consequences for it. I don't know of anything that says, well, she would be cursed until dawn if she doesn't allow access. Firstly, the whole concept of purchasing access is, let's just ignore that for a second. But which is what meher is. Frankly, it's literally that. It's like price for a vagina. I'm putting it bluntly. But if it was wrong, if marital rape was wrong, then there would be consequences, or it would be mentioned as wrong. So on using the reasoning that unless it is prohibited, it is halal, then therefore I would argue that it is allowed, because I don't know of any situations where it's been prosecuted. Underline under I don't know of, hence my question.
So for my take on the sexual consent, I feel that there is a somewhat of a very skewed idea of consent that is in its infancy stages present in the Islamic literature, because we do see this Imam Shafi say that forcing yourself upon your wife at times would be considered rape, and we do see hadith where slaves ended up raping other slaves and they got punished for it. Actually, I have one on my thing. I'll quickly share this just so we're fair and we represent both sides. So if you can see here, Imam Malik's Muwatta says that there was a slave in charge of the slaves, and he forced a slave girl among those slaves against her will and had intercourse with her. Umar bin Khattab flogged and banished him, but did not flog slave girl because the slave had forced her, right? There are other instances like this where you will see slaves being raped by other slaves or slaves being raped by non-master free men.
But isn't that again harming someone else's property issue?
Exactly. That's what it gets back to, right? So the point is you're not necessarily, like you said, punishing them for the rape. It could be just a property thing. Also, you can only get the non-consensual thing between the master, the owner of that said slave. He has right to access her whenever. But if any other person tries to, then it's still considered rape, right? Now, one thing Shabir Ali actually mentioned, his actual video is 11 minutes and less, and he mentions that even in light of the broader context of free women at the time, he mentions that men are called the lord of the women, and also one thing he brings up is women in the last sermon of the Prophet were referred to with the terminology of unwanun, which either means cows or animals with you or like slaves with you. So, and he said that Allah has given men power over women in that sense. So he was using that as an excuse too, that yeah, they have some consent, but like Samir said, they can still refuse and get the curse of Allah. But like it's
a spiritual compulsion. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that's my take on it, right? Marital rape, like you said, the 4 witness rule is very important, where if a woman alleges she's raped and she can't produce 4 witnesses, then she's admitting that she committed zina and she can get stoned, which has happened in Muslim countries. So it's a very weird, and you can see why this is a patently 7th century conception.
Exactly. That's exactly my point.
Old. Yeah.
So that's where that leads us to is you have to understand the context, and that's what anyone listening to this, I would invite them to think about that. That if that was only valid in that context, then do we therefore reject it entirely now? And or does it need to be rethought entirely? And then where does this leave us with absolutely everything else in Islam? For me personally, just this fact alone, that this is not clearly understood, is enough for a woman, for any consensus human being, but especially for a woman to say, well, this alone is sufficient reason for me to reject all of this until this stuff is sorted out. It just is fundamentally immoral. So my overall message is that this should lead us to question context and what are the implications on this. If everything is contextual, if everything needs to be rethought, then everything needs to be rethought or rejected. So that's it. Nothing else to add.
Thank you, Shaikh.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for joining. Thank you.
So I have a response that I'm going to show here that just says that there is an example of being punished for rape, but it's worded in such a strange way. This is in Jami' at-Tirmidhi. It's a Hasan hadith. It's not even a Sahih hadith. But anyways, there was a woman that screamed. So her screaming is evidence that she was raped. And because she screamed, she wasn't punished for adultery. And the funny thing is, Prophet Muhammad said, "Go, for Allah has forgiven you." What the hell was she forgiven for? She was raped. Like, how are you blaming her for this? Like, okay, you didn't stone her to death because she didn't want part of it, but like, it's such an odd statement. So, but again, this is not the example. This is an example of a free woman, not a slave, and not this is just a regular example of rape. So rape can be handled in Islamic law without 4 witnesses, but not necessarily the case. So we have a couple other guests. I'm gonna we have AX. AX, hello.
Guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, not too bad, thanks.
All right, can you introduce yourself and ask a question or comment that you have?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the last couple of weeks of what's been discussed in terms of narration and preservation. learned a lot through a lot of the discussions on par. It's interesting how, just a statement, it's interesting how when you're talking to a lot of people trained in the religious kind of trend, you get the assumption that if you really want to learn about Islam, you probably shouldn't be doing a course that is taught by non-Muslims. And yet, at this point, when you're looking for clarification, it seems that the arbiter that we want to, both sides, prefer to have is somebody who doesn't actually have a stake in the game, that is not actually a Muslim. And I understand why that's the case. So that's one thing that we want to probably have more of. The other is in the clip that you mentioned with Dr. Ali, he does mention something about a Muslim, if he can't afford a free believing woman to marry, then he is permitted to marry a slave who is a believer. I'm just a little bit confused about how that would play out. So how in the world would you have a slave, even back then, who happened to be a believer? Did she convert after becoming a slave, or can you actually enslave people who are believers?
Can I address
Good
that?
question. I feel that you can have slaves that are Muslim because there are.
So
hadith.
hold on. There's actually we do actually address that later on.
Yeah.
Gondal, but basically, no, you're not allowed to enslave Muslims, but you are allowed to keep the slave if they convert to Islam. You cannot enslave them. Okay, so let's again, this is the weird thing about Islam. Islam doesn't allow you to kidnap people and make them slaves, like the story of Joseph or the story of Yusuf. They found him in the well and he became a slave. You're not allowed to do that in Islam. Okay, yay, Islam! You can't kidnap people. Wonderful human rights for the 21st century. But you can also capture them from war and sell them. So if you capture them from war and they're not Muslim, you can enslave them. I don't know what happens if you're fighting against Muslims, but you're not supposed to fight against Muslims anyways. But let's say you fight against non-Muslims.
If it's a deviant sect, though,
then they're not Muslim anyways, right? Because only our sect is proper. So anyways, you capture the slave. You capture them, you make them slaves, and then they convert to Islam. We'll show a reference later on that basically says they don't get to be freed because let's just show the slides because I think
I just want to add one point is I heard a sheikh too, which was this whole thing about having like enslaving a non-Muslim, but then telling them, hey, if you become Muslim, you can be freed. If you become Muslim, I'll marry you and I'll elevate your status from a slave woman to my wife. A sheikh said that these are all tools that are employed as a psychological coercion or some sort to push people, prisoners of war, to become Muslims, i.e. Islam grows like that. So it fits in the greater scope of things. That's my take on it.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not totally sure. I think there's a lot here to unpack. And there's a lot of different scenarios, but I'm just going to quote this Islam QA reference that says that Islam limited the sources of slavery. So basically what we've been saying all along, right? Sheikh al-Shankiti said the real reason for slavery is kufr and fighting against Allah and His Messenger. When Allah enables the Muslim mujahideen with offering their souls, blah, 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 blah. Basically the reward they get is one of the halal sources is capturing slaves. It also says later on in the same link that if the slave becomes Muslim, then what happens? It says, well, no, because the slave became Muslim and you had the right to own a slave and he became Muslim. So you basically, okay, this is one opinion. I don't know if there's probably different opinions or whatever, but in this one opinion specifically says that they would stay as slaves even if they converted to Islam. So now the whole thing about marrying a slave, again, this is getting very complicated. I don't know all the details, but I'm guessing if you had a slave, you could marry her and she becomes a wife. She's no longer a slave. There's also walad, which is when you impregnate a slave. And should we talk about that now, or should we go to the other questions? AX, do you have any follow-up to that? Is that
just
kind of answering?
To add to it, what I meant about psychological coercion is like, as soon as you enslave him, Muhammad employed this technique by himself. Like in the cases of Safiya or Rayhana, he said, I can free you and you become my wife, or you remain a slave with this guy, the Kalbi, or just remain a concubine. So these psychological tactics were employed by Muhammad himself. But again, that's my last 2 cents. But yeah, we should move on.
Okay. Does that answer your question, AX?
It certainly does. Just one other follow-up, if I'm not sure if you guys are going to probably address this later on, but the case of, I think it was Maria al-Qibtiyya, who actually gave birth to a son by Muhammad, if I'm not correct. Not really entirely sure, but from what I remember, something along the lines that she did not convert until the birth, or she wasn't freed until the birth of the son, which means that the relations that she had with the Prophet was 9 months prior, while she was still a slave. So some clarification.
Yeah, so we will address this whole thing in a later part where we have a slide dedicated to it. This is a whole scandal around Muhammad and his sex slave Maria. And 2 of his wives were unhappy and they alleged that Muhammad is doing this. It's a whole scandal that happened, and Muhammad used Allah to shut his wives up. And then Allah said you can keep on having sex with these slaves because Allah allowed you to. We will get to that at the end, and it is quite troubling to see that. But what we will do is we will move on to the next slide and see what else we can find. But thank you a lot for joining in and calling us. It was a great pleasure to have you.
Thanks very much, guys. Keep up the good work. Cheers.
Thank you. All right, so let's see. Where are we? Now, a lot of the times what happens is, I'm just going to share my screen and get back to the presentation. Okay. So, I'm just going to go back up so we get to the point where we were. Okay, so we did talk about limiting the sources of slavery, and this slide is done as well. Now, does Islam encourage freeing of slaves? Yes, it does at times, and that is definitely true where we do see that. In fact, another place in the Quran too, like I said with Shabil, he's saying that marrying the slave, if she becomes a believer, so she'll be freed as well. And this is just this doesn't negate the fact that slavery, just because Muhammad encouraged freeing slaves at certain times, that it nullifies all the evils or all the other aspects of slavery that were committed by this. And there we will see examples. There were instances where Muhammad would actually cancel a manumission and keep people in slavery, or sometimes he would trade, let's say, 1 slave for 2 or 1 slave for 7 slaves. Point being that that if he's just freeing slaves, he's still also introducing and doing other bad things where he's introducing 7 more people or 2 more people into slavery. So at the same time, yes, Muslims do say that we should encourage freeing slaves.
Yeah.
But not always.
We're going to talk about that near the end. Thank you for your call, AX. For the next person, Weeping Prophet. Hello, can you introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning. I am an atheist from India. So I've been studying psychology of historical events. So regarding this topic, I have a 3-part question relating to slavery itself. So the first thing is identity crisis, making Muslims want to associate with the victors who they were at the end of 21st century. That's the first thing. And the second thing, identity crisis associating with losers. They don't want to get associated with losers, even though they are racially and ethnically, they belong to that category. And the third thing, a political system which gives them an upper hand in every sphere of life at the detriment of human scientific progress and human rights. They get everything because they have these hedonistic benefits in that. So why should they leave Islam? Like, how do you convince them when they have the upper hand in every sphere of life? Thank you.
That's a very interesting question. So I think one of the things he mentions is the identity crisis that is commonly seen today in Muslims with the colonialism, and it's an inferiority complex, I believe he was alluding to, where post-colonialism and world wars and everything, the Muslim empire was broken up. The Muslim states were dissolved. The caliphate was dissolved. And since then, the Muslim world has been, let's say, kind of almost trying to chase the Western world. So a lot of times, these inferiority complexes and things come up in the minds of Muslims, and that's why they want to appeal to, let's say, the West and their academic excellence or the science and stuff. And hence, you see that Muslims will then come back to claim that, oh, science was already in the Quran, or these moral values were in the Quran. Muhammad was a champion of feminism or the Prince of Peace and stuff like that. I don't understand your question regarding the losers, but I would assume it was along the lines that
I mean, they want to associate themselves with, suppose, the murderous sultans of the past, conquerors and everything, but they don't want to get associated with the conquered people who are like liberal and scientifically progressed. So every time they look at the past, they associate themselves with murderers. These enlightened people.
So I think you're referring to like the jihad like Ghazis and
yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah. Like in that movie, what's that? Ranveer Singh's new movie in that song Kali Bali.
Yeah, Alauddin Khilji.
Yeah, exactly. So Alauddin Khilji and a lot of these type of characters. So I get what you're saying, because but just taking the subcontinent's history of Islamic conquest and empires, there has been a lot of time. Muslims actually ruled Hindu majority population for a huge while, the Mughal Empire, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Like it could be that they don't want to get associated with the history and the violent history of the past with some Muslim conquest that had. The third part of the question, I believe, was referencing that if they have a caliphate and have everything they want, how would you offer them hedonistic ideas to get them out of Islam? Could you clarify
the hedonism is already present in the Sharia. When Muslims are getting benefits through Sharia, like women, property, and everything, how do you convince them to leave it? Like,
okay, so that question comes from a point of reference, right? Like I feel like Islam doesn't give into hedonism because it's also a relativistic claim. Like back in the day, let's say the liberties given to you by Islam might have been more so than maybe available in other parts of society. But nowadays, if you were to say, oh, Islam actually gives people lots of happiness and hedonistic values, I would very much argue against it and say that no, the 21st century, our society has progressed so much that Islam actually limits people's freedom, in fact, of giving them the freedom. But I do see your point that if there's a Muslim who believes fully that the caliphate is real, and if he actually is living in an ideal Islamic state, then Muslims will get that sense of power and control. And if they have their way, then it makes sense. Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense for them to leave their religion if they're running an Islamic state.
Yeah, and apparently even in Islamic history, a lot of people converted to Islam to avoid paying jizya, because the jizya is a humiliating tax that's put on non-Muslims. So if you become Muslim, I mean, you don't have to pay that tax anymore, right? So it became a source of conversion as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comment. We're gonna keep it moving. So thank you so much for that, and we're just gonna go to the next one. Hello, we have atheist. Hello, atheist. Atheist? Are you atheist or are you atheist?
No, I'm a bit of confused right now. How are you?
Okay. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, okay. I'm calling from Pakistan, and yes, and I would like to say I'm a big fan of yours, both of you.
Thank you.
Yes. So my question was actually, being a Muslim, when I used to recite Quran, right? Like I always ask myself this question: why at that time I did not question, like these kind of questions did not came into my mind, that slavery, like I was even reading the you can say I was reading tafsirs from Maulana Maududi and everything, right? But these questions, like slavery was permitted at that time, right? They never came into my mind. I don't know why. Even when I started listening to you people or other people, only then I started like realizing it, and then I started studying about it. But why not when I was just reading it as a Muslim?
my take is that these things are not presented to you. You know, they're not really talked about, and in some ways they're sort of irrelevant to modern Muslims, right? I mean, slavery is not happening anymore, so why would it even come up, right? The issue comes about when someone is looking, again, going back to Muhammad as a perfect man, then you start to see inconsistencies when they're highlighted to you. So a lot of times, I mean, me and Gondal were talking about, sometimes as a non-Muslim, now you read a verse of the Quran and you're like, I can't believe I didn't notice how bad this was.
Yeah.
Because you have a faith tinted glasses on.
Yeah. I would just quickly add to it, like you said, the lens of the believer. Now, for myself, because I'm from Pakistan, like the caller here, and he can relate to that. Muslim majority countries, in a country like Pakistan, is such a monolith where it's like 98, 97% Muslim. You're intellectually isolated, that you're never exposed to a different perspective. And what happened with me was, when I came to Canada, I was exposed to so many different ideas. And eventually I realized that I need to stop looking at the Quran from a lens of a believer and maybe put on, like Samir said, the lens of rationality and analysis, and then look at it. And as soon as the perspective changed, the whole thing crumbled. And that was very important, that changing of perspective and being able to view something that you hold very sacred to yourself. It takes a lot, but if you can view it from a different perspective, I think that's all it takes to open the box of Islam, and it's all over.
Thanks for your call, Atheist. We have another caller in line, so I'll have to leave it at that. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And we have Zubair. Zubair, hi, how's it going?
Hi, Zubair.
Yes, we've been seeing. I've seen you in the comments a lot, and your long, critical comments you've been putting on my YouTube channel. I saw.
Can you hear me first? Can you hear me first?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Would you like?
Okay, my line is not very good, but inshallah, I will try. Inshallah.
Okay.
Okay. First, what I wanted to say is, first of all, I'm not very fluent in English, but I will try to make my point. Okay.
Okay.
First of all, the Islamic scholars have spoken about this issue of raping slave women and taking them as a sex slave, and all this. You understand?
Yes, I understand. Go on.
Okay, in the book of Ibn Qudama, in his book Al-Mughni, it is written that the ulama, especially the early ulama, the early scholars of Islam, and especially the scholars of the four madhahib, they have nearly a consensus that a captive woman who is not a Muslim, the Muslims were not allowed to have intercourse with them unless they become Muslim. This is in Al-Mughni. He talks about it.
But the hadith says that they wanted to sleep with the Arab captives of war who were not Muslim.
And
the hadith, he talks about the hadith. He said this hadith exists, but the ulama has gone against this hadith. You understand?
The Prophet? And
no, they didn't go against the Prophet. They interpreted this hadith. You understand?
Okay.
So they said that this hadith, because these people, it was talking about the battle of Autas. These people were polytheists. They were pagan. You understand? So they said it was nearly ijma of the ulama that a pagan woman, a Muslim, cannot sleep or cannot have intercourse with a captive.
Okay.
Who is a pagan. You understand?
That seems to go against
a lot of references. I would disagree, because a lot of references and a lot of hadith tell us that Muslims.
No, listen.
But you know, even I have a reference.
The scholars, they knew these hadith. You understand? Yes. And the question I wanted to ask you, I wanted you guys to bring me only one reference that say that either the Prophet or the Muslim slept with slave girls who were non-Muslims. I want that reference from you.
I have one right in front of me.
Right on the.
I don't know if you can.
That were non-Muslims.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
that's what it
for a
says.
second. And I'm
Because
just
you
gonna-
can't take Muslim women as captives, right?
It says right here that the companions of Muhammad felt guilty, were reluctant to have relations with the female captives because of the pagan husbands. We're talking about these were married women they captured.
Now, one thing to point out is there was a verse revealed about this, and that's what I need to get to. It's 424. It says, all married women are forbidden unto you, save those captives who your right hand possesses. And this verse was sent down specifically to tell the Muslims that you can continue having sexual intercourse despite these women being married off and their husbands still being alive. So if Allah is saying that,
listen, this is your interpretation. The scholars, they know this verse and they know these hadith, but they said that the woman, if she's pagan, she has to embrace Islam first. You understand? You know the wife of the Prophet, Juwayriya, she was a pagan.
okay, yeah.
Can you hear me?
She stayed a pagan.
Go ahead.
No. Here's the
She
thing.
was a pagan. She was taken captive. You know.
Yeah.
And then she went.
Keep that with you. I'll show you something.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna share.
I want you to bring.
Sure, he's gonna bring something. Yeah.
Okay.
And Zubair, I do appreciate you calling in. Honestly, it takes a
No
lot
problem.
of
Okay.
Here you have two atheists, and
No problem. It's my pleasure because this is an important issue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So here we are looking at Tabari. I think it's
No problem.
Yeah. It's talking about Rayhana, right? Yeah, a woman from Banu Amir, and she remained his concubine when he predeceased her. So it's saying that the Prophet offered to marry her and opposed the curtain on her, but she said, rather leave me in your possession as a concubine, for it is easier for me and for you. So he did so. When the messenger of God took her captive,
what are you quoting?
Well, I'm trying to say that this lady was a concubine of Muhammad, but not a Muslim, and he still has.
Which lady?
Rayhana.
Which lady?
Rayhana.
No, I'm not talking about Rayhana. I'm talking about Juwayriya.
No, but I'm just giving you an example that it clearly says that.
No, Rayhana. First of all, you have to bring me. You have to bring me an authentic hadith that say that Rayhana was from the Prophet's slaves. Authentic.
Okay, here's another one. Let me give you one. Buying and wait. So here's another one. Okay, Ali, Prophet.
Tell me first. Yeah. Tell me first about the hadith and the authenticity of it.
Yeah, it's Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih. So it says that Ali went to the booty and he had sexual act with a slave girl, and one of the Sahabis complained, and the Prophet said, "Do you hate Ali?" And he says, "Yes." And the Prophet replied, "He deserves even more than that from the Khumlus." So he had sex with a slave girl. That was. It appears non-Muslim because she's still part of the war booty or was captured.
No, you can't know she wasn't Muslim.
Yeah, let me find the reference from Muhammad having.
Obviously, she's not Muslim. What battles with Ali and what would the Prophet be sending him to attack Muslims? Like the Prophet didn't send Ali to kill Muslims. Obviously, these are not Muslims.
No, listen. When women were taken captives, they have to give them a da'wah. Some of them became Muslim, and these ones who became Muslim because they were captives.
So what does it change if she had to be Muslim?
Okay.
How does that improve the situation of sex slavery?
Here's another hadith.
For Muslims?
No, listen. This is not sex slavery, because I'll tell you something. You were talking about consent or non-consent. When we are talking about Arabs, pagans. You understand?
Okay.
So when a woman is a pagan, can I finish?
Okay. Your last point, and then
can I finish?
Other calls. Thank you, Mufassil.
Can I finish?
Yes. Make your last point.
Can I finish, please?
Yes.
When a woman is a pagan, then she's a bit among the captives. A Muslim cannot have sex or intercourse with her while she is a pagan. I told you the ulama, most of the ulama, the majority of the ulama have this opinion.
Okay.
Now, if she becomes Muslim by her own choice, that means she took the decision. Let me finish. Let me finish, please. If she become Muslim, that means she took the decision to separate herself from her husband if she was married before. You understand?
This goes against
so
all
because of Islam,
all the evidence we know.
Yeah.
because of her becoming Muslim, her marriage, herself, she has cancelled the marriage with her husband, her former husband.
Okay.
So this is a consent. She knows she's a slave. She knows she's a captive.
Okay, thank you for your opinion and your points. It's
Thank
much
you so much,
appreciated.
Zubair.
Thank you for joining.
We're gonna take next call. Okay, and the next call is Mufassil Islam. Mufassil.
Hey, Mufassil, my man, how's it going? It's so nice to see you. I haven't talked to you before, but salam, peace, and lots of love.
From your friendly neighborhood, Mufassil Islam. Okay, how are you guys doing, guys? You all right?
Great, great. It's nice to see you, man. It's great that you joined in, actually.
All right, thank you very much for having me. The topic is slavery. Well, I probably missed first half of the program. I'm just trying to pinpoint your definition of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
How define?
We
slavery?
actually went by the definition by
yes, I missed
Jonathan
it.
Brown.
If you could short in brief, tell me.
Yeah.
What is your definition of
slavery? We'll pull up this slide by Samir. Yeah.
Sure. Let me add it. Yeah. Yeah, slavery is best understood as an involuntary relationship of mutual dependence between two quite unequal partners. I mean, that's one way to define it. It's something when you see it, you know it. But what's your point exactly? Or what do you?
Well, I'm trying to find out whether slavery, from your point of view, really exists in Islam, and to know that first of all, I need to know what your definition of slavery is, and secondly, I would need to know what are your platforms for saying this is from Islam. What are your sources of depending that this is from Islam?
It started with the
give me
Quran
one,
and
because
Sunnah.
you have been
I think you did miss the beginning, right? But
yes, I do apologize for that. I do apologize.
Yeah.
But I have seen a lot of referencing from Bukhari, right? And I consider Bukhari 99% of them to be of that Bukhari to be.
Okay, we can just stick to Quranic references.
I'm just making my point.
No
clear.
problem.
There are many reasons. I can give you a dozen of reasons for there's no argument there from any of the sides. Will be able to disagree that Bukhari is more or less 99% not to be accepted in Islam to be unquestionable.
Sure.
Okay,
so,
let's go for Quran. What is there in Quran that you want to denote that to be slavery? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Okay, for example, 23:6, those who guard the private parts except for the wives or those who the right hands possess. Before you answer, before you jump in, I'm just going to say that we are presenting this from the Sunni doctrine perspective. We're not going by Quranism. We're not going by Quran only or historical revisionism. We are going based on
Sunnism or Shiaism. Sunnism or Shiaism. You have to change your title to Sunni Islam or something like that. But still, when you talk about Islam, when you say Islam, I have to know your basis of calling it Islam. So if you want to base it on Quran, I have no problem with that. Just stick to Quran then.
I'll give you the best reference where Allah tells Muhammad to take slaves from the captives directly from the Quran. Is that okay? Would that suffice?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. But I'm just, the problem is I am, as you see, I am out and about. It's drizzling a bit because I'm having an awful connection on my internet today. So go ahead.
So what I'll do is I'll share my screen and we'll be talking about the verse 33:50. And it's very clear in its message, and this talks about it.
Can you quote the
I'm quoting, so it's Surah Ahzab, Surah number 33, verse number 50, and I'll read.
Surah 33, yes.
Yes, and it says, O Prophet, we have made lawful to you your wives, to whom you have given their due compensation, and those your right hand possesses from what Allah has returned to you, that is captives. And then it goes on, the daughters and the people that, he can't marry. And then he says, with you and a believing woman if she gives herself to the Prophet, excluding the other believers. So it's a specific thing that's special to Muhammad. And the last part of the verse says, we certainly know what we have made obligatory upon them concerning their wives and those their right hand possesses, in order that there will be upon you no discomfort. This verse is very explicit in saying that, yes, having concubines is not only halal, but Allah tells him, do it.
Well, you see, when it comes to concubine and engaging the war captives into sexual, whatever you want to call it, prostitution or whatever, there are several verses that I can bounce that off. But the main problem is the terminology of slave. That's why I started with the word slave. In Quran, there are several words which are used to somehow refer to some people who are not totally free. For example, there are almost 31 verses which will directly or indirectly refer to people who are not totally free. I can give you a list of them. You can check. But those words will include, for example, Fataytikum, then Abdina, then Wal Abdu, Bil Abdi, Fataytikulmu, and I can go on naming those words.
Well, in that sense, nobody is free because we're all Abdullah.
No, I'm coming to that. Now, when it comes to Rakabatin and the exact use of the word slave, who denotes slave. In Islam, if you read Quran, Surah 16, verse 75, that's what will someone be defining a slave, because the word abd, directly or indirectly, wherever is referred to in the Quran, it is the word is slave for Allah, because we are slaves only for Allah. You will never find abd, the word abd, used by any Muslim, even for name for any other being except for Allah. So when it comes to slavery in Islam, it's Abdullah, not Allah. I mean, we can laugh a while, but in England, for example, UK, in 1833, the slavery was abolished. But technically, our forefathers, I mean, I understand you probably, at least a couple of you, I mean, both of you, and me included, we came from a region where slavery continued until 1919, where indentured laborers were in fact slaves, servants were in fact volunteer slaves, though they are branded as servants. So if you want to call about what Quran is denoting to say right hand possess, they are the people who were captured following the kitabis, the people of the other books, and because they were being enslaved, they were being captured. So they were following the Deuteronomy chapter, because if you believe the Khaybar incident, and you also want to go into the history.
Okay, so I just want to interject here a little bit, Mufassil, is that just because you're referencing other people partaking in slavery and sex slavery does not make the slavery that happened.
I haven't been able to.
Samir, you're muted as well.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Gondal. Go ahead. Just finish.
What I'm trying to get to is, if you keep referencing the slavery in the Bible or other people doing it, that's just whataboutery. That's not getting to the point. I'm still trying to see what the point is here, as in regards to Abdullah.
Yeah, can we just finish it quickly, because we want to. Yeah, so just 1 more minute, please.
Okay.
And
I will be finishing it very quickly.
Okay.
Very, very simple. The words right hand possess denotes to people who were captured at war and they were slowly freed. And that is clearly mentioned in Surah 9, verse 60, how it is encouraged, because Quran is a book of inspiration, how to free those people who are in captives, because Muslims were under the obligation of following the book of the other people for their judgment until a certain period of time. So if you remember, when the Jewish people were captured, they were if you know the judgment, how they were judged, they were asked, and they opted for judgment to rely on someone who were their middleman, and they were obliged to follow
the
laws
right?
of the book of theirs, which is Bible and Hebrew Bible, and they were judged by Deuteronomy, and they were enslaved under that. Well, I will just take you one more minute.
Going on
and we can move on.
again.
Yeah,
So,
I'd
if
say
you read
let's
the
stop it here.
history of Dunuas, before that, the Christians did the same to the Jews did the same to the Christians, and they were given an offer to be judged by their own book. That's how it is.
Yeah, so the point I'm trying to get to, a lot of people back in history thought racism was okay, slavery was okay, so therefore Islamic slavery is okay. You can't reference somebody else's shortcoming to make an argument and justify your own. That's not even an argument.
You're breaking up. I don't know. You're breaking up, man. Let me walk out of, my home.
Okay, Mufassil, thank you for your
let me
call.
walk out of my home.
Okay, thank you for your call, Mufassil, and for trying to say everyone's a slave, and in Deuteronomy they also had slavery. I don't know. I don't see the point. Anyways, so the first caller we had was trying to say you have to be Muslim to have sex with your slaves or something, and the other one was saying everyone's a slave. But yeah, I apologize for cutting you off, but we do want to continue the slides now. So let's get back to the slides because
they're very juicy. So we'll take calls in like a next 5.
Yeah, we'll take slides. Yeah, exactly. So we said this one. We talked about this. Did we talk about this one? The jealous?
No. So let's do this. I did mention it briefly, but I'll go over it again. This just shows. This is a very interesting from Imam al-Exmuslim, one of the earliest collections of hadith, and is said to be one of the most soundest ones as well. So a man comes to Umar bin Khattab and complains that he used to have sex with his sex slave, but then his wife was mad and jealous of him having sex with his sex slave, so she suckled the girl, the sex slave, turning the girl into a mihram, and hence rendering the guy's possibility of having sex with her as zina or incest. And so the guy is upset about this, and he takes the matter to Omar, complaining about his wife's steps. Omar says, "Go back to your slave and continue having sex with her and beat your wife." That is self-explanatory. It's bizarre. The second part is from the Quran, having revealed 5 or 10 sucklings that can make relationships like invalid, because it establishes kinship. Long story short, yeah, this is just one weird hadith which just shows how bizarre this whole
it shows how unhappy the wives were about sex slavery.
And it's not just this guy's wife. Muhammad's wife were unhappy as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
yeah. Oh,
we already talked about this.
Okay, talk about this, or should I?
Yeah, we went over this.
No, we didn't.
We didn't actually.
The law of qisas. Now, this is very interesting. The law of qisas is saying that basically, again, Allah is equating a slave for a slave, a free man for a free man. So if someone murders your slave, the retaliation would be an equivalent in slaves. Slaves are actually valued as less than free people. Which is, again, very strange because a slave is a human being just like a non-slave. I don't totally understand the fiqh behind this, but it is right there in the Quran that slaves have a value less than free people when it comes to the law of qisas, or the law of retribution or equality. Okay?
Yeah.
We talked about limiting sources of slavery. We talked about that. Yay, Islam only allows no kidnapping, but it allows prisoners of war. But once the prisoners of war are slaves, you can sell them, buy them, trade them, 2-for-1 deals. We'll talk about that. Okay, let's talk about something a little bit positive. Sort of positive. The Quran, encourages freeing the slave. It's considered a good deed. So right there, it's admitting that slavery is actually a bad thing.
Yeah, covertly, it's admitting that. Yeah. Because if it was a good thing, then why is there a point to free the slave at all? Like Sharik said earlier, is if the slavery model in Islam is so good and so amazing, and the caretaker system is so productive, the slaves should just remain the slaves and be happy. The masters just keep giving them care, right? So like I said, it becomes a circle. Slavery is immoral, so therefore free the slaves, but then don't free the slaves.
Can you explain this?
Okay, so this one's very, very interesting. We were talking about this. So Muhammad had a concubine whose name was Maria, and this hadith talks about this whole scandal that happened where Let's just read the hadith. That the Messenger of Allah had a female slave with whom he had intercourse. But Aisha and Hafsa, his two wives, would not leave him alone until he said that she was forbidden for him. They were not having it. They did not want Muhammad to have sex with the slave girl, right? But then Allah revealed, the sublime Allah revealed, "O Prophet, why do you forbid yourself that which Allah has allowed you to do?"
I know,
And
like, why are you trying to be a good person? Like, what the hell? Like, why are you feeling guilty about having sex with these captured women? There's nothing wrong with that. Listen to you. Allah, I'm gonna tell you, it's fine. It's fine. Just do it.
I don't get it. Like, this guy Muhammad has like what, 11 wives or 13 wives, a bunch of concubines, and he still wants more sex, man. Like, chill out, dude.
Yeah. And you have a good explanation for that too, from the neuroscience perspective of how it affects your sexual.
Yeah, hypersexual behaviors and epilepsy. Yeah, definitely. And we have actually classic examples from like Wayne Bent, where he actually ended up exploiting minors, and then also ended up marrying his adopted his son's wife, very similar to Muhammad marrying Aisha at a young age, and then also marrying his adopted son's wife.
Yeah, we didn't bring this up earlier, but this was a really interesting comment someone's made in the chat, that like, this is a very good hypothetical question. If you like slavery, just put yourself in the slave's shoes. What if some non-Muslims came, they captured your wife as a slave, they took your daughter and your son as slaves? Would you be okay with that, even if it was Islamic slavery, with the rules of Islam? Would you be okay with this? Like, it's a good question. Put yourself in the shoes of the person that's captured, right? Like,
it applies to like other things too, right? Like apostasy. Well, if you're okay with the Muslims and Islam killing their apostates, well, why are you not okay with Christians or Jews killing their apostates, right? In theory, that you should be okay with them killing their apostates too, from stop them to converting to your religion. But like I said, as long as it favors you, it's all good. But it's not in your favor, oh, it's immoral.
So this also shows you the psychology of Muhammad, that whenever he wanted something that he was being troubled by others, for example, marrying Zainab, for example, his wives are complaining about something,
a verse will come in the Quran. Yeah,
this will come in the Quran and will give him exactly what he wants every time.
The details of this scandal are so bad. I think Surah 66 Tahrim, and he goes to the point where he literally threatens the wives, Hafsa and Aisha, indirectly saying, like, if you go against Allah, will replace you, and all the believers and the angels and Allah is against you. So the psychological game it plays with the wives is they have this illusion of, yeah, they can say no, we want to leave you and stuff, but can they really? Because the backlash and the psychological manipulation is intense.
So next one.
All right, this one's interesting, where it says Yahya said that Malik related, again from Imam Malik. So Umar al-Khattab said, "What's the matter with men who have intercourse with their slave girls and then dismiss them?" Point is that he's admitting that there were lots of Muslim men who were just enslave women just to have intercourse with them and then just sell them or just dismiss them or just leave. Point is, it just reminds you that yes, sex slavery was a common thing. And it says here, no slave girl comes to me whose master confesses that he has had intercourse with her, but that I connect her child to him, whether or not he has practiced coitus interruptus or stopped having intercourse with her. I think he's saying that if a slave gets pregnant, the master is
denying it.
Yeah.
So it just goes back to the imbalance of power again.
Exactly.
With a marriage contract, you're agreeing to marry this woman and take care of her children. In the West, especially nowadays, and maybe all over the world, you are financially responsible as a father because you made the baby, and you're also responsible to care for the child's well-being and financial support and all that.
Yeah,
it's just saying that they wanted to have the cake and eat it too. They're having slave girls, but they're not willing to take responsibility for the babies that they're making. Right?
Yeah.
And again, is this good for society? That Muslim preacher yesterday was saying, "Oh, Islam is good for society," but is this good for society really? No. Creating a whole bunch of slaves that you can buy and sell and have babies with, and then even if it doesn't happen today, theoretically it can either come back, or even if it doesn't come back, the fact is this is all allowed as part of the religion. It's not condemned, right?
Yeah, and what I want to make one point is the Islamic history is full of this, like from the Mughal empires to the Afghanis, and then great Muslim scholars even had slaves from 15th, 16th century. They would have concubines, and they would admit to it. So it's not that this was only happening in the first part of Islam. This lasted for a while.
Yeah, and Jonathan Brown admits that too in his book. We'll get to that. Can you explain this?
Okay, so what happens here, and this is one more example, is the Prophet sent Ali to Khalid to bring the hummus of the booty, and I hated Ali. So Buraida, this guy, the companion, hated Ali. And Ali had taken a bath after a sexual act with a slave girl from the hummus. So yes, Ali, the cousin of the Prophet, and his son-in-law had sex with slave girls. And he was married to his daughter, by the way. He still allowed him to have sex with slave girls. So anyways, I said to Khalid, don't you see this Ali? When we reached the Prophet, I mentioned that to him, i.e. that he had sex with the slave girl. And then the Prophet asked, oh, Buraida, do you hate Ali? And Buraida said, yes. And then the Prophet replied, do you hate him? For he deserves more than that from the hummus. So he deserves even more slave girls, more war booty, more captives.
Yeah, he deserves that. Yeah, he's a good commander, I guess. So he gets lots of booty. It gives a new meaning to the word booty, eh? Okay. This one was really hilarious. You found this. You want to read this?
Yeah, so this was I was just going through his last minute find. Aisha had a male slave and a female slave who were married. So there's a slave couple that Aisha owns. And I want to free them both. It makes sense. Yeah, if they're both married, just let them off, go free. They can enjoy their honeymoon. The messenger says, no, if you free them, start with the man first and then the woman. Like,
why
is there like that? It's like they're like does like the male slave have more value or takes precedence over female slaves?
Why do you want to keep the female slave?
Is this another form of patriarchy manifesting itself?
Well, female slaves have certain benefits that male slaves don't have, right? So I don't know.
Maybe because the guy is free, like he can. Oh, okay.
Okay, so again, do you want to read these?
Yeah. So a man manumitted a slave, and he had no other property than that. So the Prophet canceled them. This is what's important. When Muslims say that the Prophet always encouraged freeing slaves, here's an example where the guy was already given away to pay. The Prophet canceled the manumission, canceled freeing of the slave, okay, and resold them to pay off debt.
Yeah, okay? And there's other examples like that too.
Yeah, this is just one. There's like 3, 4 where he says that don't free the slave, give it to my uncle.
Yeah. That's the next slide. We'll talk about that one.
But here's an interesting one where the Safiya thing, where Muhammad first, after the Khaybar, he killed her whole tribe, burnt her, I think it was his uncle or dad, tortured on her chest by lighting a fire, whatnot. After all of that, he then gives Safiya away to this guy called Dia Kalbi by mistake. Then people thought, oh no, she's a daughter of the chief. She's too pretty. You can't give it to Dia Kalbi. So then Muhammad says, oh shit, calls Dia Kalbi back, then gives him 7 slaves to get Safiya back. Point being, he's introducing 7 people into slavery to get one girl that he likes. And what I want to understand, you to understand that at this point, he already has a bunch of wives and a bunch of slaves. Like, why are you not satisfied? Why do you keep wanting more and more? The point is, like, slavery and like trading 7 for 1 again shows that slaves are a property, and they have varying values depending either on their skin color or their male or female and whatnot. And this shows that this is it's just despicable, like Mufti Abdullah said.
Yeah. Although I don't think Mufti Abu Layth was talking about Muhammad. He has to get out of condemning Muhammad, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. One of the responses that people sometimes give is that, well, if a slave woman gets pregnant, she becomes a special type of slave, or she's sort of his wife, but she's not exactly his wife. She becomes an walad, and it even says this is so damaging.
So you just sell the slave that is the mother of your child?
That is the crazy thing.
That's ridiculous.
It says we used to sell our slave women and the mothers of our children.
Wow.
And the Prophet was still living amongst us, and we did not see anything wrong with that.
Wow.
Had a baby with her. So she's still a slave.
Wow, that's crazy.
And if you, so the fiqh says that if you die before she dies, she's freed. That's in Sunni fiqh. Apparently in Shia fiqh, she's only freed if the child is still alive. And her value is then deducted from this child's share of inheritance. I don't know the details about Shia fiqh. I just read that online. It may or may not be true, but this is what it said. So for Sunni fiqh,
Wow.
there's a sort of small advantage you have if you get pregnant with your slave master. So I mean, how is anyone defending this? Like,
there is no defense. I mean, you can't defend this. Like, come on, if you want to think that in the 21st century you can try to make arguments or pro this stuff, I cannot help you any further. Like, how much, like, it's at this point, like, you have to like hold everybody's hand and drag him out of this, because this shouldn't need explaining. This should be self-explanatory exploitation of vulnerable people.
Yes. And I'm just going to go back to the whole racism issue in Canada, in America. It shows you that we've, the fact that veganism is becoming more popular, the fact that we actually are angry about police brutality and about racism. Our ethics have gone way past slavery, yet we still have people defending slavery because they're stuck. Like, it's like Shabir Ali. I like Shabir Ali. It just shows you that a good person, like, this is what religion does to good people. It can like rot the brain, because what it does is it forces you into a position where you have to defend it. And Jonathan Brown, his whole book is defending. I mean, he talks about how bad it was, and he's not saying slavery is good. He says slavery is bad, but he has to sort of say, well, that was that time. Today it's bad. So he's basically taking sort of the Mufti Abu Layth approach of trajectory hermeneutics. Islam wanted to free slaves. Islam was making it, the goal to free slaves, but
it comes back to the more relativism, right? And I don't buy the argument that Islam wanted to free slaves, just a gradual. Man, you did a spontaneous, hardcore smackdown on so many other things in Arabian society. You could have easily ended slavery. If you could end idolatry, usury, fornication, you can end this.
And let's talk a little bit. Like, we gave examples where slavery was actually kept going. Like, okay, this is a good example. Like, let's talk about this.
Yeah. So it says here that a man among us promised freedom to a slave after his death, and he did not have any property other than him. So the guy who owned the slave has already promised that if I die, you go free. So the Prophet told him.
What a beautiful thing to say.
Yeah, it's a nice, noble thing.
Yeah, you're my slave. I'm going to die soon. You took good care of me. I'm going to free you. Now, let's see
but the Prophet didn't free him. He sold him to another guy to pay off that again.
And in another hadith, it says the slave died the same year.
Wow. Oh, wow.
His last year of life, he would have had a year of life as a free man. It was taken away from him because of Muhammad.
Wow. The next one says in Ibn Majah, a man had 6 slaves and he did not have any other wealth apart from them, and he set them free when he died. The Messenger of Allah divided them into groups, set 2 free, and left 4 as slaves. Gosh, dude, this guy is bad. Like, I am seriously getting pissed reading this stuff. Like,
I'm getting pissed too.
I'm getting pissed.
Like, okay, you want to free slaves, and like, I want to swear right now, like, free them. Why are you doing this? Like, I know the Islamic thinking.
You give a false. Just imagine the psychological backdrop of this. These slaves are told that yes, we are free. They're expecting. They're happy. Yes, you've got our freedom. Oh no! Just imagine the psychological turmoil they go through. It's so terrible.
It is.
All right, let's go before we start swearing at this.
Yeah. And the reasoning for this, just to kind of explain it, is Muhammad was trying to say that, take care of your family, meaning he was preferring the Muslims over the slaves. He was saying, well, you guys shouldn't give away all your slaves, keep some slaves for yourself, or keep them get the money for the slave rather than, Now this is another moral justification against slaves running away.
And the one thing I want to know, that this is just one hadith. There's a plethora of hadith about slaves running away, and then anyways, to simplify it, if a slave runs away, no salah will be accepted from him, and if he dies, he will be a disbeliever. A slave of Jarid ran away, and he caught and struck him in his neck, killing him. So basically, I don't want to even comment on this. Like, it's so despicable. This is
crazy. It's crazy. It's like the guy got mad at him for running away, so he killed him, and then it even just.
And then they tell us that slaves have rights, and why the hell was this slave try to make an attempt to run away if he was so happy being enslaved by Muslim who were giving him all his rights and whatnot?
Exactly.
Think about this. The psychological component is very important.
Yeah.
Here's another interesting one, and why this is interesting is there's another hadith about this in Ibn Abdullah is also Sahih. So there was a blind man who had a slave girl who used to slander. So an walad, it's exactly what it says. He had a slave girl who gave him offspring, 2 sons. She used to slander and defame the Messenger of Allah to a great deal, and the master would tell her to stop doing that. But she would not pay heed, and she kept insulting the Prophet. And one night, the master just got a dagger and just stabbed her and killed her. And he went to Muhammad, and Muhammad said, I bear witness that her blood is permissible, and the man faced no repercussions for it. He killed a slave girl just for insulting Muhammad, who was his sex slave, i.e. concubine, mother of his Walad. And nothing happened. She just killed, and Muhammad totally acknowledges and endorses it.
Yep, crazy.
It's crazy. This is from Tabi, I think it's volume 5. Here, we showed this earlier in regards to Zubair when he was talking to us. The point here is, so when some of the captives from Banu Qurayza did Najd in exchange for them purchased horses and arms. So basically, Muhammad sold a bunch of people to buy weapons and horses. For himself, he selected Rayhana, a woman from Banu Amir ibn Qurayza, and she remained his concubine when he predeceased. So she's his concubine his whole life, apparently. The Messenger of Allah offered to marry her and impose the curtain, and she said, I don't want to be married to you, I'll just be your concubine. Imagine, put yourself in her shoes and think what she's going through this. When the Messenger of God took her captive, she showed herself averse to Islam and insisted on Judaism. I think this guy just forcibly enslaved her, and she doesn't want to become Muslim. She's showing her aversion to Islam, okay? So the Messenger of God put her aside, and he was grieved because of her. You killed her whole tribe, no wonder she's not happy with you. Then while he was with his companions, he heard the sound of shoes behind him and said, that must be Talaba coming to bring me the tidings of Rayhana acceptance of Islam. He came to him and said, Rayhana has become a Muslim, and it gave Messenger of God a lot of joy. Do I actually believe she became Muslim? Absolutely not. Like I said, imagine yourself in her shoes. A lot of the times, these kind of positions these people take is to keep themselves alive. Okay, she tells Muhammad, I don't want to become Muslim. I want to remain a concubine. I don't like Islam. Muhammad is upset and he puts her aside. She realizes Muhammad is the one in control. If she remains upset, no wonder what will come her way. So in hopes of lessening the drama and the consequences she will face, she then says, okay, tell him I accepted Islam so he'll be happy and I won't face the bad ramifications of this. That's what I'm trying to say. Put yourself in these people's shoes. And that's why I keep telling Muslims, watch the show The Handmaid's Tale. You are being complete idiots when you devoid the psychological context. You have to put that in there. Anyways, I think we should take a call after this slide and see.
Yeah, please do join the stream if you haven't, especially if you haven't done it before. We want to take some new callers before we take the existing ones again. Giving slaves as gifts. Okay, so can you explain this?
Yeah. So here what happens is so the woman from the Hudayl tribe threw a stone at a woman from the same tribe. So these two women are having this fighting, and they're just throwing stones at each other, right? And this one woman had a miscarriage because the stone struck her belly, or she fell, whatever. The Messenger of Allah, bless him and grant him peace, gave a judgment that a slave or a slave girl of fair complexion and excellence should be given to her as compensation for the miscarriage. So here we learn that you can actually use humans as gifts to compensate.
Islam is feminist, bro.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, this is a quote from Jonathan Brown I was talking about. Yet it was not until they encountered European abolitionism in the mid-19th century that they, meaning the Muslims, considered eliminating riq is the word for slavery, as an institution. Since then, Muslim scholars and intellectuals have developed a range of arguments, some mirroring Christian abolitionists, for justifying ending a practice that God and his prophet had allowed. So
again, are humans better than Allah and his messenger? Are they more moral? Or is Islamic morality so outdated that we had to take the word of other humans and throw out the Islamic position, the halalness of slavery? And that's what bring back to is you ask them, this is the thought experiment actually, if you get a Muslim caller, I want to do that with them. But let's take a call and see if we have somebody.
So there's a comment about Zanj, the rebellion. Do you know about that? The rebellion of black slaves who were Muslims against Arabs.
I don't know. I haven't read much about it.
I don't know about that either. So I'm going to take Kalja Ranjit Singh. Hello, Kalja.
Hello,
Khalda. Ranjit Singh Khalda.
How are you? And
sir, I would like to one more demand that when statues of slave owners are being cracked all over the world, whether in England or America or Canada or wherever else, then should not be a demand be made that Muhammad, the slave owner, should be banned from the world discourse as well?
Well,
and the Quran should be sent to a library as well.
That's actually a good question, and yeah, a lot of people have brought that same thing up. Like I said, if you want to criticize everybody else in history that was partaking in slavery, why stop and not criticize Muhammad as well, right? And it's a good question. For the statues being destroyed, like I said, I don't try to comment on political things, but my 2 cents is I would rather move them to museums and make full-on collections for people to see that these people were the slave owners instead of destroying them. But then again, I can also see that the context and the emotional, the sentimental backdrop of certain people seeing the statues of slave owners and destroying those as well. So there's both sides of the argument. I don't think I have ever come across a statue of Muhammad, but I did hear that one kind of sculpture exists in this U.S. Supreme Court where he's holding the Quran. Yeah. That's about it. And like I said, yeah, I agree with you. A book like the Quran should completely be sent to the library that has no place in the 21st century.
Well, just as Torah, Manu Samriti or Bible has been sent to Quran library, similarly Quran should be sent to library for study.
Yeah, we should study it. Yeah, you definitely.
Okay, sir.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so if we have anyone else who wants to call, please do call in. And if you're enjoying the stream, please consider sending a super chat and donating. It is most appreciated. I'm going to go back to the slides. There's not that many slides left. We can just finish them up now while waiting for the calls. The Book of Financial Transactions, chapter Selling Animals for Animals of Different Amount or Quality, hand to hand. I don't know.
The first problem I have is selling animals for animals, different amounts of quality hand.
Okay, hold on. We have another caller, so let's take the call and we'll get back to this.
All right.
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
How are you?
Hello, I am good. Sorry for my English. I'm not good at English, but I will try.
Thank you.
So my question kind of is similar to that of the before one. Like he said that why should not burn Qurans and everything. I kind of wanna add that why not reform Islam? Because reforming Islam is kind of a solution to this problem. Because then more people will be more people will know about the problems and the issues with Islam. So what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll do a quick one on this. Firstly, I don't think burning the Quran or burning any book is a good idea. I say that even Hitler's book Mein Kampf shouldn't be burned. Instead, it should be studied and analyzed. Same with the Quran. Like, And these should be viewed as vestiges of the past and glimpses into the history of our ancestors and how they taught and how they came up with their beliefs and ideas. But I wouldn't say burning the Quran is a good idea. In a sense, though, it could be used to make a political statement. Yes, people do that. It has been done in history, so I do see that part of it as well. Reforming Islam. The problem with reforming Islam comes from the problem of very strict ideas around the Quran, which is elevated to the literal speech of God. So it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room, right? But I do acknowledge that I feel ending Islam or expecting that Islam is going to go away all of a sudden overnight is unrealistic. It's not pragmatic. I feel like the progression of how Islam will dilute itself from more literalist to more Sufi and more metaphorical interpretations. And that's how it should be. And I would see people like Mufti Abdullah and then even Yasir Qadi bring up these issues and slowly pull that dogma out of the Islamic creed and make it more, let's say, give it a more intellectual backdrop. I would definitely love to see that. And like I said, at the same time, I do see the other argument too, where the existence of these people who give a very numbed down version of Islam can give cover to the literalists hiding and hijacking the narrative later on. Again, it's a deep conversation. You can have hours and hours of conversation about what is true Islam. Is ISIS the only Islam? Even the idea that how do you define what Islam is? Do you define religion as it appears in its original sources? Remember that this is the Muslim view, hold on to the Quran and Hadith and Sunnah. But academia does not view that, because when dead people die, religion ceases to be a functional part of their lives. So what we go with is we see how the people that are alive, religion forms society and how it affects their lives. So that's a functionalist view of religion. Anyway, those are my 2 cents on that. I think I went on for too long. Hopefully it answered the question, didn't confuse you more.
Thank you.
Yes, that answered the question. And one more thing I want to add is that exactly as what you said, reforming Islam will also have one more solution of the problem, because here in subcontinent there is a lot of power gain of power because of Islam. They use Islam for gain
political
power, and
they'll
many
blasphemy just to get political. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, blasphemy laws.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, back to where we were. So this was selling animals for animals of different amounts of quality hand to hand. I firstly have a problem with this heading of the chapter, because it says animals, but we're talking about is slaves came and gave pledge to the Messenger of Allah, did not realize he was a slave. His master came looking for him. The Prophet said, sell him to me. So he bought him for 2 black slaves. So point being that this guy comes to Muhammad and becomes Muslim. And then Muhammad finds out later, oh, he's actually not a free man, but a slave. Instead of Muhammad returning him to his master, he says, hey, how about I give you 2 black slaves for this 1 Arab slave, right? Or 1 Muslim slave. The point being is like that 1 Muslim slave took precedence or was equated to 2 black people. And this isn't an isolated incident. This actually happened earlier, like we said, about Safiya. He gave 7 slaves to get Safiya, right? So like I said, the imbalance in value, and I mean, it explicitly doesn't imply that black slaves are of half value. It could just be that Muhammad only had black slaves in his possession, so that's the only 2 he gave to at the time. But we can definitely establish that slaves are not valued equally amongst themselves, nor put at the same value equivalent to free men or women.
And of course, Muslims today would see this and would be able to justify, if they ever wanted to, like if the situation ever arose, they would have moral justification for slavery, right? It's just like it's there in the Quran. It's allowed. The Prophet did it. The companions did it. It's they bought and sold slaves, right? So All right, so rights of slaves, we kind of talked about this a bit. You know, you're supposed to give them food and clothing.
Yeah, well, like Mufti Abdullah said, even if you put them in a 5-star hotel, you kidnap them, and you still have the power. It's still the same. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but they can't run away, and you know, if they run away, they can be killed as disbelievers, and the salah will not be accepted if the salah will not be accepted. That means there's Muslim slaves too, right? Obviously.
Yeah, exactly. But what I want you people to do is read this part. And keep this in your mind, the rights of slaves, and then watch that TV series, Handmaid's Tale. I kid you not, I cannot stress the importance of that series and realizing what actually went on and how slavery plays out with its psychological component. Like Mufti Abdullah said, you can put them in a 5-star hotel there, you're still owning them, you can still force them, you have total control over them, right? So anyways, let's keep going.
Do you know if Rehana's brother was still Jewish at the time of the death of Muhammad? It's a question from Weeping Prophet.
Oh, I'll have to look up. The Sierra books quickly. I can make a post about this, but I'll check. Yeah, I'll have to check.
That's all I have in the presentation. So we can basically make some final comments. We've
take more.
Yeah, we can take a few more calls if there's any more callers that want to join in. If you haven't called yet, this is your last chance, and then we will be ending the call. So, okay, I'm just gonna look at the comments in the chat for now. Let's see. Okay, let's take this one. How and what identity issues emerged in Indian subcontinent after Islam's entry into the region, and how its ideas transformed the region and Islam itself? I would listen to people that live over there. I mean, we're mainly talking from the Western context. Abdullah Gondal knows a bit, can talk about Pakistan and how it was over there. Obviously, creating a state based on religion, I think, is a very dumb thing to do. And I don't think that we should be, this is for the past now, creating these sort of, we need to be humanistic now. We need to put ourselves first. We need to take care of the environment, take care of the planet that we live on, take care of animals that live here, all conscious beings, all conscious creatures, I should say. And this is what we need to be united on this, not on religion, on color, on faith, on these tribalistic sort of boundaries. That's my opinion on that. Do you have anything to add to that?
For me, I would say that when Islam came to the subcontinent, what it did was it colonized it to a great extent. So what ended up happening was a lot, like there was a Hindu culture, the Indian subcontinent culture by themselves, but then when the Muslim conquest came, there was a conflict where these Islamic values versus Hindu values. And also what ended up happening is Indians, Hindus, Bengalis, all brown people, Desi people are inherently the same. But they have been divided so much because of this religious difference. It just baffles my mind, and it's a form of tribalism that keeps popping up. Like, for example, the whole point was to make Pakistan was to have a separate country for Muslims, but it backfired because there's more Muslims in India than in Pakistan, right? So it doesn't even make sense. And I feel it was a beautiful strategy by the British to divide and rule. As you divide these people, let them fight, and there's that. And to this day, we're fighting over these petty supernatural things, which we shouldn't be. We're the same people, same culture, even the same language, for God's sake. Like, come on.
I think just something came to my mind that Islam creates this super tribe of faith that is much, even though it eliminated racism, so to speak, let's say, I am willing to consent to give that point to Islam, that it does, on the surface attack racism. It creates a much worse system of tribal-based superiority where you are basically superior to non-Muslims in every way, and that becomes a us versus them mentality, right? The kuffar versus the Muslims, Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Harb, the abode of Islam or Dar al-Salam, and the abode of the disbelievers. And there's a lot of antagonism. The Quran says, don't take them as your allies and friends. It creates it gets rid of racism, but it creates something else that's even worse, right? To me, it's unfortunate. Okay, so we do have some guests. Hey, James, how's it going, James? Nice to see you.
Hey, James, nice to see you again.
Hey guys, great to see you too as well. Great presentation you've done. I just had one question on the topic, which was basically back when you two were both Muslims, and how convincing did you find it? Did you ever come across the kind of apologetic tactic of saying, oh, well, Islamic slavery isn't like Western slavery. In fact, it shouldn't even really be called slavery. It's more like servitude. Kind of in Islam, you had to treat your slaves so nicely, and very often slaves even became kings. Like, I know, did you come across that, and how convincing did you find it back when you were in a kind of Muslim mindset?
I'll go first. I found it very convincing. I didn't really look into it. I mean, that's a problem with, I think, any sort of person that limits themselves to Islamic sort of, I don't want to say propaganda, but like if you're immersing yourself in Islamic everything, like you go to Islamic conferences, you listen to Islamic lectures, you try to associate only with Muslims, you don't talk to non-Muslims as about these things, you tend to become very one-sided, and then you're not really critical. You hear something that sounds good. Some of these sheikhs have got away with a lot in the past. They was making a lot of claims and nobody was countering them. Yusuf Estes is like, it's embarrassing the claims he's making. Like I saw a David Wood video where he was making claims about the Catholic Church right on the website has this, like, it's so funny. The things he was saying, they're so wrong, but nobody's countering. People are like, yeah. And, sometimes you see the Zakir Naik response videos I do, people are all like clapping and you're like, he didn't even make a good point. Like, it's like, what is this? The slaves in Islam sometimes became kings. Jonathan Brown actually brings that up in his book too. And he does have a point that slavery means a lot of different things to Islamic history. And there are cases even among non-Islamic states where you have conditions, for example, he mentioned in the 1800s in Britain where you had this sort of employee-employer contract that was in some ways worse than slavery, where if you didn't show up for work, you can go to jail for theft or something like that. So he gives some examples. So it's true, there's other bad things in the world than just slavery, but we are holding Islam to a higher level because it's supposed to be from God. So when you say that, oh, but other people did this, like Mufassil Islam was saying, so what? Like, it's still bad. Whether anyone else did it or it's still a bad thing, right? And so, yes, I was convinced by these things because I wasn't critical. And I think what we're doing now is we're trying to push back a little bit and hoping that the dawah is not just going to be, it's going to be, and these, again, I have to mention, these institutes have millions of dollars of funding. Yaqeen has, $3 million they got, and the year before that, 1.8 million. Their full-time jobs are to put out apologetics. And, there's people like Gondal and myself, we're doing this part-time, we're doing this on the side, and we're trying to counter these gargantuans, right? So it's a tough battle. It's an uphill battle for sure.
For my take on that, did I buy the Muslim apologetics? Yeah, when I was Muslim, right? Like, and especially coming from Pakistan, I keep saying that most of the Muslim world was so intellectually isolated, and the internet has obviously brought so much more to light. But same with myself, was I would buy these arguments. Yeah, the Prophet had slaves, but he was so nice. And then I would remember the movie The Message, where there's a part where the slave converse and he's so happy, and so I would like play those and like, you know what, I had this this fantasy kind of concoction of what slavery was in the Islamic sense, because Bilal was freed and he was standing on the Kaaba. But after I came to Canada, and I was like, what, 19, 20, right? So I was still trying to understand the history of slavery, and I got exposed to more ideas. And it's only then I started analyzing it more critically, and then comparing their answer. Okay, well, if these people are making this excuse that, okay, Muhammad was a man of his time, he could have done it and whatnot, and people were treated nice. Well, were there other people in history that made the same claim, but also had slaves? So would their slavery be forgiven in a sense? So there's a lot of things, and over time I was like, I can't continue believing this. This doesn't make sense. But one thing is that change of perspective coming to Canada, being exposed to different ideas is so important. And I think this is what the internet is doing now. I had this exposure 7 years ago, but now people can be sitting in Pakistan and have this exposure on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And I hope it keeps going that way.
It seems like logically kind of it's most stable, like the belief is most stable when you have absolute certainty. and then once that kind of like once you're compelled or provoked into kind of thinking things critically or like checking properly, then it will either unravel to probably atheism or very, very liberal Islam. So, and I think what you guys are doing is great in like sort of causing that, tugging the thread, and then people will start tugging the thread themselves and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for your call, James, and
thank you so much.
Appreciate the support. All right, next question from Thinkerman. Hey, Thinkerman, go ahead. Oh no, I lost him. Okay, well he gave me the question in the chat. If he comes back, I'll let him ask the question. The question was, on what basis can you say secular morality is better than Islamic religious morality?
Okay.
So we'll start with that one, and then there's one more.
Okay, so one subtle distinction I need to make before we start is what's the goal of the moral framework. Okay, Islamic morality isn't always about making the human experience the best possible that it could be. A lot of the time, Islamic morality is about not incurring the wrath of an omnipotent, omniscient being, and it's also to get his pleasure. So a lot of the times you're arguing these two different frameworks are trying to achieve a completely different goal, where the secular goal, let's say, you can go by axioms like, I want to increase human happiness at an individual and societal level and help the environment. Let's just say this is your axiom, right? And people go off on that. The problem is I have no problem accepting that, yes, morality is a subjective thing. Morality is, like any other thing, a biological adaptation that we humans come up with to help us survive in a changing world around us. So the things change around us, our moral values change to accommodate that change. That's the beauty of secular morality. In anthropology, we keep telling people that there's a functionalist approach on morality. No moral framework is inherently better or worse, because the words good or better don't really have a meaning if you go into the philosophical deep end. They all were there to serve a purpose, right? So for example, if the purpose of a certain belief, no matter how absurd, was to aid people in survival by pushing them to, let's say, go hunt more, then yeah, that belief is okay. There's this approach too. Now, what I would say is morality should not be second. I think it's Arthur Clarke that said that one of the biggest tragedies that had happened in human history is morality was hijacked by religion. And I'm going to do this thought experiment now. And what I want to understand is religious people don't realize that they are also, their whole moral framework is also subjective. Take this. Ask a Muslim, is incense objectively immoral? If he says yes, for example, incest, if he says yes, then you appeal to Adam and Eve. How can something be objectively immoral and then Adam and Eve doing it? And if the God is omnipotent, omniscient, he could have easily avoided this thing, but he chose to start humanity in this way, right?
Yeah.
And you see that the progression of morality from different prophets changes every time. Every holy book has different things. Even within the Quran, morality changes and evolves, where you first were to like lock women in houses for adultery, but then you have to whip and lash them and then stone them. Or the alcohol, where initially it was okay, then it was banned only for salah, then it was completely banned. The point is, if to an external observer like me, I'm standing here and I look at this Abrahamic moral framework, I see a bunch of people in different eras of history erupting and making claims about morality, but none of them are able to justify the objectivity of their claim or the existence of their deity, which brings me back that religious morality in its true core is indistinguishable from moral relativism, but most people don't realize that. In the end, what secular morality is, what do you even mean by secular morality? It's just, do you mean the morality of Stalin or Hitler or today's 21st century human rights? And that's what I'm going to get back to, is morality has always been as what humans have collectively agreed upon. And that's how it's always going to be. And it will change. Like, for example, 100 years from now, you might find that people viewing the modern 21st century industrial age as modern day economic slavery. You will see people like that, right? So the point is that I don't really see the moral argument as even a relevant argument for God. It's a complete non sequitur. Okay. At the end, this is my 2 cents. What I would say is that humans have demonstrated that they have the capability of coming up with better, let's say in a sense, like ideas on morality that lead to greater happiness and life satisfaction in human society, but they also have the capacity to come up with the most bizarre, absurd, and nonsensical frameworks, as we see in the Bible and the Quran, and even in modern day, like Stalin, Hitler, and whatnot. Point is, we need to work together to come up with a framework that will increase human societal and individual happiness and help our environment and ensure the survival of our future generations in a way that harms the least people and increases human happiness to the maximum. And again, I admit that these axioms that I am making are subjective, but that's all the best we've got. I think I spoke for a bit.
That's a great answer. I don't have anything to add to that. Thinkerman, thanks for your question. I think we'll just leave it at that. I know you had one more question, but thanks for the call. Is that good? You good with that?
Yeah. At the end of the day, I'll just summarize before we end this. So what we've learned today.
Yeah, we're gonna give one. Since there's one more person waiting, let's just do the last. Hey, Hellbound Iscariot.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
I don't know if you've actually heard of David Wood. Some of his criticism seems like he's just of Islam just seems to be he's just doing it in favor of Christian apologetics. And like I think he actually talked recently about the Barbary slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
And I heard that I've also heard that people say, well, the Barbary slave trade was worse because the slaves that were actually traded were actually castrated.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting comments.
What I would comment on it quickly would be that, David Wood does levy a lot of criticisms against Islam, but he stops right at Islam because most of his criticisms can easily be back projected onto Christianity. And that's the one thing I don't like about when Christian people end up joining this side of things, where they will be making criticisms, philosophically great valid points against Quranic stories or plagiarism or scientific mistakes or bizarre things Muhammad did and sex and slavery and misogyny and whatnot. But the Bible, if anything, has more of all of that than the Quran or the Hadith, right? And that's what I keep coming to, is fairness is very important. And if I were to ever converse with David Wood, if I make a point against Islam that does attack Christianity in the same equivalent way, I will bring it up because, like I said, intellectual honesty should be what should take precedence over your religious sentiment and affiliations.
Yeah, I've been actually hearing a lot about the Barbary slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade. And Muslim traders, from what I've heard, actually traded with the European slave traders.
Yes, actually, this is in Jonathan Brown's book, I believe. Samir shared something like that. What other thing was, somebody mentioned this, like there was a huge rebellion apparently as well from the black slaves against the Arabs. And in fact, in one of the books, Jonathan Brown says like Muslim nations were amongst the last to abolish slavery, right? What also comes to my mind is, although like a Christian slave trade was bad, I feel like where a point I remember, if I read this correctly, the Pope said that black people don't have souls. I'm pretty sure this was said by the Pope this is in the infancy of the United States, something along the lines where they were treated, and then that led to them treating them as animals and whatnot. So, like I said, both sides are evil.
The Bible definitely allows slavery.
Yeah.
I thought the New Testament didn't, but I had a call, an atheist call, and she mentioned that even the New Testament talks about slavery as well, and religious Christians have used this actually to defend slavery. And like Jonathan Brown says, all religious institutions have been used in this way. So yeah, it's definitely a problem for both religions.
Actually, I think the justification for slavery in the New Testament comes from the book of Titus, I think. Let's see if I can find it. Like, I don't know if it's Billaman. It's one of those New Testament. Huh?
Yeah, so I was going to say thank you for your call. We're running over the time now. We want to end the show. Thank you so much for your call. Gondal, do you want to take one more last caller, or should we just end it now?
Yeah, we can take one last caller and then some right now.
Hellbound Iscariot. Thanks for the call and the question. Mike Dia, hey, you're the last caller. You get the last word before the video.
That was my destiny. Thank you so much. I was waiting for that. We're talking about Qadr. That was my Qadr right here.
Yes.
Okay.
The divine
thank you, guys. By the way, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, especially Gondal, I feel like he's been doing this since he was a baby. But just wanted to ask, how did you guys, it was more like a personal question. How did you guys make the transition? Because I don't know if your wives are still Muslims. I'm not sure about that, but I was just wondering about the transition, because recently it's been maybe 7 months now that I've had my crisis, and it's more like a personal crisis, and I haven't even I didn't do the Ramadan this month of this year, and even the prayers I haven't been able to do them due to that crisis. So now it's, as you know, everything goes upside down when these type of things happen to you. So I was just wondering now, how did you guys do that? Because I've always seen myself with a Muslim, and now I don't know if I should go still with a Muslim and make up a disease for the month of Ramadan and say I have to take my pills because I'm diabetic.
Yeah.
Or for the prayers say that I have knee cancer. I can't really kneel and pray, you know. So I was wondering, what is your take on that? What can you say about it? Thank you.
Oh my God, that's a tough question. Well, I'm glad you clarified that you're not already with anybody, so that's a different situation altogether than when you're with somebody. If you're not with a woman already, I mean, I don't know. It depends where you're living and the situation. Is it a Muslim country? Is it a non-Muslim country? Can you clarify that?
I actually live in Canada, but I go back and forth in my Muslim country. Yeah.
Okay. So I would. Okay. In that case, I would recommend being honest about your beliefs. And I don't know if it's a good idea to get into a relationship with a Muslim woman unless she's liberal and secular and she doesn't care about you. I mean, my old boss was Christian. He was married to a Muslim woman, and I was a little bit shocked when I heard that, because that's not common. But if you can make it work, you can make it work. You know what I mean? Like, there's some challenges for sure. I wouldn't recommend obviously getting a religious woman, because you're gonna have problems for sure. And problems might arise later on, even if they don't come right now. And sometimes people become religious later on in life, and then what do you do, right? So, but then sometimes people become less religious. Like in my case, I was okay. We managed to work it out. Faith isn't that much of an issue anymore in my relationship, so that's a good thing. But I don't know. Everybody's different.
Yeah. For my side, like how my family reacted and whatnot. Initially, like it took me about a year to come to terms that, okay, I don't believe this. Like it was a year of research back and forth, going to secular or like, let's say, non-Muslim sources, criticisms of Islam, and then back to apologetics, trying to justify what back and forth. So the problem was, like, my wife she converted to Islam. She's white. She converted way before I even met her. So she was a convert Muslim, and then I was becoming ex-Muslim. And slowly what happened was I was not sure if I should tell her or not, because I feared that, okay, if I tell her, she might just leave me, because then if you become an apostate, your marriage ends and you'll be a fornicator, right? So there was that. But then I was also contested, but that'd be so wrong that if I don't share my thoughts and things with her. Eventually I posted online, came out to her. Her first reaction was like, yeah, I might leave you. But then eventually we talked through it. And then a few months later, she left the religion too. I would suggest that avoid getting into a relationship with a religious person unless, like Samir said, they are liberal in their views, kind of like a cultural Muslim, which is fine. Because a lot of times I understand, like, your parents, your parents might want you to marry somebody from the same culture and whatnot, and you want to please them, and you don't want to bunch of things, right? So you can find somebody that might still be in, let's say, Pakistan, who still identifies as a Muslim, but when they come to Canada with you, they can live a happy, like, full of pleasures and party and whatnot. But again, like Samir said, or a lot of times what happens is these non-practicing Muslims come to Western countries and they get super attached to their prior culture and they become more religious. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah, that happened to me. Like, you can say I was a like secular Ismaili and I became a religious conservative Muslim. It's honestly, it's such a difficult question. By the way, I forgot to say, congratulations on, following your heart, and like it's inspiring to see that you're actually able to have the courage to like leave, religion behind when you found out that, I don't know if you have doubts or you're not Muslim at all anymore, but I mean, this is a great thing to do, to actually, when they say you guys are causing doubts, yeah, we're causing doubts. Doubts are a good thing. It's better to be less certain than more certain in life about anything, and knowledge is, it helps you. So yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that, but yeah, thank you for your call. And I think yeah, just play by ear, see how it goes, and try not to I guess the best thing to do is just be honest about, what, if you can be honest and try to look for someone where religion is not an issue. I know ex-Muslims, one of my very, very good friends, he's with Muslim, like he found a Muslim and she's even a hijabi, but she's not Muslim. I mean, she's atheist pretty much, right? But she wears hijab around her family still. And that's perfect for him because his parents and, are happy to see that he's marrying a hijabi. So it's perfect, like ex-Muslim hijabi with ex-Muslim guy. I mean, that's amazing. Sometimes, things don't always work out so well like that, but just be honest and try not to, don't be dishonest because it can backfire, you know what I mean? Unless you're in a very difficult situation, where you have no choice, and then even then try to lean towards less religious. But yeah, that's all. And like I said, you're going to be the last call, man. I'm sorry, but we're not taking any more callers. Is not in your qadr to be on the show today. It's gone on 2.5 hours. So thank you. Yeah, Mike, Abdullah Gondal, you want to make any final comments before we end?
I just want to summarize the presentation and whatnot, and then conclude. So my concluding remarks would be that we've learned today that Muhammad had slaves. He had black slaves. He had sex slaves. He had concubines, not one, but a few. And he had kids with them. Okay? His wives didn't like him having sex with concubines. We find that Muslim men would use concubines and then discard them when they got pregnant. We also find that Sahaba would go on wars and become so horny and perverted that they would capture women to have sex with them, but pull out because they still want to ransom them after. And if they get pregnant, then the ransom value decreases. We also find that Muslim men and Muslim army exchanged slaves for horses and weapons. We find that slaves were killed and nothing was done about them for merely insulting the Prophet. So in all, putting everything together, Islamic slavery, at the end of the day, yes, it might not be sometimes as bad, but at the end of the day, it was pretty bad. I mean, you cannot say that these sex slaves were loving, they wanted to be slaves, they want to continue in slavery, or that these women whose husbands and tribes that you've slaughtered, you want to have sex with them the same day and they'd say yes to you. That's delusional. So at the end, it was like I said, slavery is not a religious problem. I think it's a human problem, and it keeps popping up in different faiths in different regions of the world in one shape or form or the other, right? And I think wherever it is, whoever does it, no matter if it's Prophet Muhammad or Abraham or George Bush or Trump or Obama, whoever does slavery or took part in it or condones it in any shape or form should be called out for it. At the end, I would say that my last sentence would be, your beliefs and convictions should be proportionate to your evidence. This is one thing that I feel religious people can reiterate as a mantra to themselves, that your beliefs should correspond and scale to the level and caliber of your evidence. With that, I will say goodbye from my side. Had an amazing time talking about these issues. We can obviously spend so much more time going into details about the history, and we were just mostly focusing on Muhammad and his time of slavery. But if you want, like Samir is going through the book from Jonathan Brown, where he accounts a lot of accounts of this historical slavery found in the Islamic Empire. So Samir, any last closing remarks from you?
Yeah.
But that's all from my side.
Thank you. That was amazing. You speak really well. Final comments from me. I'm just going to mute. Final comments from me are that Muhammad, the last and final messenger of all mankind, the best man of all creation, the one who Allah corrected when he went wrong. I mean, how do you square that with what we just showed you? Like, never mind Aisha being a child. Let's say let's dispute that. Let's say she wasn't a child. She's 18. What about everything we just mentioned? What about all of these issues, that we've just brought up? It's just a lot. There's a lot of things to unpack there for someone that's supposed to be the last and final messenger, the perfect man. How do you cannot reconcile these two things? There's just So I thank you all for the super chats and the donations. Please subscribe if you're new here, and we'll see you next week, hopefully, on the 3rd episode. If you have any comments or suggestions on what you want us to talk about, please reach out to us either on Facebook or Twitter or even email. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.